All right, so the goal is to do at least half, at least half the test today to go over it. All right, so write this down. Don't just sit there and watch. Don't just sit there with your head on the ground, on the table, which I see 2, 3 already, 4 already. Starting off real good. All right, 5, there's a 5th back there. Okay, you can find one. All right, so that's what we're doing. We're going to review for the Chapter 2 test. As I was putting this together, I probably should have had a Chapter 2 test like halfway through Chapter 2. Had a Chapter 2, 1 to 2, whatever, but I didn't. It's my first year teaching out of this book. Next year, maybe I will do that, but because it's been a long time since we had a test, and we're halfway through the year and we're only on Chapter 2. But that's how it goes. All right. So the goal is not to necessarily give you tons of information, but the information that we go over, I want you to make sure that you know how to do. That's the whole thing. All right. So the first word of the day is midpoint. All right. So let's just write that down. All right. So you need to know what a midpoint is, how to find the midpoint if I give you 2 points. So I am going to just give you some, hopefully these numbers will work out nice. I'm just giving you some random numbers. Let's say 4, 6, and I don't know, 10, 16. All right. So I'm going to ask you, what is the midpoint between those 2 points? And you have to give me a point. Now, the answer must be written as an ordered pair. Don't just say 3. That doesn't make any sense. If I say what's the midpoint between 2 points, just giving me a one-number answer, just 3 or 7 or -4, those don't make any sense. So it's going to be wrong, all right? So you need to have an ordered pair for your answer. So if it says find the midpoint is a point. Just like these are points. These aren't the midpoints, but they're points on a graph. One point is over here at 4, 6. The other here is at 10, 16. And you want to find the point that's in between, halfway, not just anywhere in between, but halfway in between those 2 points. So you need a formula. Do we have a formula for midpoint? Absolutely. Let's write it down. So the midpoint formula is an ordered pair, okay? And first thing I do is this. I put this over 2. Now, ordered pair's got to have 2 parts to it, an x and a y coordinate. That's the x part, the x coordinate. This is the y coordinate. All right, so that's the first thing I do before I put anything else in there. All right, I put the parentheses, put the comma, put over 2 over 2. Now, on midpoint, what do we do to get on the top of here? Something over 2. What is that? It's not minus. It's plus, right? And it doesn't matter what order. You could say x2 plus x1 or x1 plus x2. It does not make any difference. I'm going to go x1 plus x2. All right, so you take the x's. All right, we'll talk about that here just in a second. You add them up, you divide by 2. It's as simple as that. But you got to remember what to do. The actual doing of it is not that hard. You got to know what to do, though. That's the part that you got to remember. Now, you add the x's and you divide it by 2. What do we do over here on this y coordinate? Take a wild guess. Do the same thing, but we're doing what? You're adding the y's together. All right? So that's what your formula is. You don't necessarily have to write it down when you write out the test, but you need to know how to do this, what this stuff means. Well, let's take a look. This is an x, and this 6 would be a what? Is that the other x? It's the y. That's right. Okay? This one right here is a x, and this is a y. Right. This would be x1, or x1, y1. This would be x2, y2. Again, it doesn't matter which one's 1, which one's 2. As long as you add the x's together, you divide by 2, and then you add the y's together, and you divide by 2. So let's do it. It's very, very simple. I promise you. That's not just math teacher talk, right? You know what math teacher talk is? Oh, today's lesson is going to be really easy, and then it's like crazy hard. No, it's not math teacher talk. It really is true. It's very simple to do. You just got to know what to do, all right? So here's what I do. I put my parentheses, put my comma. It's the very first thing I do. And then I put what? Over 2 over 2. Why is it over 2? Because midpoint is half. Exactly right. Midpoint is half. So that should be easy to remember. Would you agree? Midpoint, half. Oh, That's where he always puts over 2. All right? So that should make sense. Now, what do I do to find the x's? What do I do to the x's? I add them up. That's right. And what are my x's? 4 and what? 10. And I'm going to write it down. We could just do it in our head, but I'm going to write it down just so you see what we're doing. Now I take my y's and I add those up. Which ones are my y's? The 6 and the 16. So let's add those up and let's see what we get. So 4 plus 10, 14, and that's over 2. 16 plus 6, what's that? 22 over 2. Now don't leave it like that, because if you leave it like this, I will mark it wrong. Everybody understand that? You got to simplify the fractions. 14 over 2 is 7. 22 over 2 is 11. Look at that. 7-11. How about that? You know what's dumb about 7-Eleven? At least in the wintertime, I go disc golfing a lot, right? So my thing, it's just my thing, but every time I finish disc golfing, I always stop either at 7-Eleven or Wawa and get me a Slurpee, right? I love it. It's just my treat after I disc golf. And so I go, so I've gone to 7-Eleven since it got cold, right? 2 or 3 times maybe. Every single time the Slurpee machines aren't working. None of them are working. So I think they shut them down. I think they shut them down during the winter time because people probably don't want cold drinks. He does what? Triple cups. I don't know what that means. Stacks his cups. All right, anyway. But anyway, saw 7-Eleven. I'm just kind of mad at him. Haven't been there in a while. So I go to Wawa all the time. But 7-Eleven has more flavors to choose from. 7-Eleven just has, well, I only get one anyway at 7. I get Coke. But they have a red one and a blue one. You don't mix them? And then, no. I'm not 7 years old. I don't mix them. All right, let's do another one. Let's not do another one. But there is another one on the test. All right, we've already done one. That's good enough. There is 2 on the test. Everybody got it? This didn't have any negatives. The number 2 one's got some negatives in there. But you just have to know how to know. You have to know, if I could speak, how to add the negatives together. So I'm not going to do that. But there is another midpoint one. Right? So 1 and 2 are both midpoints. I give you 2 points. You got to find the midpoint. All right, let's jump to number 3. Number 3 is also a midpoint problem, but I don't give you the points. Take a wild guess. I give you a graph. They did this on the homeworks, didn't they? I think so too. It's probably where I got it from. All right, so 3 and 4 are, well, they're kind of the same. Let's do some different colors so it shows up a little bit better. All right. So what if I did this? And I asked you, no, I'm sorry, I lied. Different problem. Let's do this. Let's go from here, I don't know, to here. All right. So it's not a line, it's a what? A line segment. Very good. You guys took geometry, right? Yeah. All right. So there's a line segment, and I asked you to find the midpoint of this line segment. So you could do it a couple ways. You could just look at it and just kind of figure out where you think halfway is, or you could actually figure out what the points are. All right. So let's figure out what that point is. Let's figure out what that point is. So this point right here. Or you could just do this. Since this is horizontal, I'll tell you this. On the test, number 3 is either horizontal or vertical, and number 4 on the test has got a slant to it. All right? I mean, these all have some kind of slant to it, but you get the idea. It's more diagonal looking. Yeah. Which one is undefined? Undefined is up and down. It's vertical. So is that 0 and then a number? So, but you can still find the midpoint. So that's you're thinking slope. All right, we're not talking slope. All right, we're talking midpoint. All right, so this is actually, if it's up and down or across like this, horizontal, it's actually a little bit easier, I think, just a little bit easier, because this is all you got to do is figure out where you are on the x-axis here. How far over are you? 1, 2, 3, what? 4. So it's not 4, it's what? It's -4. How far over are you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. You with me? So how do I find that? So I don't even have to worry about the y's. Would you agree? Because what is the y going to be? 1, 2, 3. -3. It's not going to be 0. It's going to be -3. And this is going to be -3. Agreed? All right. So the y part of this will just be -3. So where's halfway? Well, how do I do that? -4 what? What do I do? What math do I do? Plus what? 7. Right. I should have picked an even number. That's okay. -4 plus 7 is what? It's 3. So, and actually it doesn't even make any difference if it's even or positive or even or odd. So what does that mean? That means, where is our midpoint? It's over 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? Did that work right?
No, you're off 1. It'll be 10 total. So you only get 2 over.
Yeah, you need to divide by 2.
Oh, I didn't divide by 2. Oh, my word. Okay. Thank you for that. All right, so I add them up and do what? Divide by 2. Wow, how could I forget that? Thanks for reminding me. And that's what? 3 halves is what? 1 1/2. All right, so I go over 1 and what? 1/2. So where's the midpoint? It's right there. Okay. Now you don't have to write 1 1/2. The only reason I did that is so you could see it on the graph. Okay. So how could you write the midpoint? Just write 3 halves, comma what? How far down did you go? You didn't go down 0. You went down what? -3. I made that way harder than it really is. Sorry about that. All right. So you could have done this. I made it way too confusing. So what number was that left point right here? It was -4 what?
3.
-3. And what was the other point? 7, -3. I should have just done that instead of just counting over. And then how would you do this? Midpoint is equal to, this is the way I should have done it because that's the way I did the other one. Should be consistent. What do I do with the x's? Add them up. -4 plus 7 is 3. -3 plus -3 is what? -6. Okay. Then just keep that 3 halves. It's fine. If you wrote it 1 1/2, I'd give it to you. It's no big deal. But you could just keep it 3 over 2. And what's that going to be? -3. There's your answer right there. That's a little more straightforward. I was trying to make it easier, but then the further I went, the more I was figuring I was confusing people. Everybody with me on that? Now, number 4 is going to be very similar to number 3, except it's not going to go horizontal or vertical. It's going to be some kind of a slant, like this. Everybody with me? It's not really any different. Find that point right there. Find that point right there. Write them down. Put them into the midpoint formula, and you got your slope. Or not your slope. I did slope all last period, the last class I taught. So it's not slope. It's what? It's midpoint. It's midpoint. Okay? Everybody think they're good with those?
Yep.
All right. Let's do another midpoint one, but this is the hardest one out of the 5 of them, okay? Because this will be 5. So number 4, you got another one. I'm just not doing an example for you. All right, so you got 2 of those. Then we jump to number 5. Number 5 is the one that's a little bit more confusing. We have done this before, obviously, because it's on a test. I've done all these before. Here's what the question says. It says, write this down, a lot of talking. It says, find the other endpoint. Do you remember doing that? Where they give you a midpoint and one endpoint, and you got to find the other endpoint? Yes. Okay, so you find the other endpoint of a line segment. I'm not going to write this whole thing down, but find the other endpoint of a line segment with the given endpoints 2, 5, and the midpoint is 5, 1. Who was that? I didn't even see him. Oh, did he drop something off? Oh, the umbrella. Good. Gotcha. All right, so watch. EP, what do you think EP stands for? Endpoint. Good. MP is midpoint. So here's the deal. Everybody watch. They give you an endpoint. All right, let's visualize it. I'm not going to draw the graph, but let's say it's probably not to scale or it's not the right direction. I don't know. But let's do this. How many endpoints do you have to a line segment? You got 2 of them. So they give you one, right? They give you this one, let's say 2, 5, and they give you the midpoint right there. What are you trying to find? The other what? The other endpoint. So I don't know the other endpoint. I hear a lot of talking. I don't know the other endpoint, so what am I going to call it if I don't know it? X what? XY. All right, let's call it that. All right. Now, I don't know if this is slanted right. It doesn't look like it. Right, 2, 5, 5, 1. Yeah, it's definitely not right, but let's just say this is 2, 5. And let's say this is 5, 1. Okay, and I got to find this. So that's what this problem is asking you to do. Everybody got that? We are still going to use the midpoint formula, but we're going to use it just a little bit different this time. All right, so you remember what midpoint is? Midpoint is an ordered pair. It's over 2 over 2. This is x1 plus x2. This is y1 plus y2. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to fill this stuff in to this. All right? Well, what do we know? What do they give us? They give us a midpoint, don't they? So where are we going to put it in this little formula? Put it in for that. You watching? Okay? They tell you the midpoint, agreed? Right? On the other problems, the other 4 problems, you had to find the midpoint. This time they tell you the midpoint. So I'm going to put it in for this. So what is it? 5, 1. Agreed? Yeah? Okay. Now, what are we going to do here? Still put this over 2. Let's still put this over 2. What does this say? We add the x's together. Now, what's the unknown thing? What's the other unknown endpoint? XY. That's right. Okay? So look what I'm going to do. What does this say to do? It says to add the x's to the endpoints. Agreed? So it would be 5 plus x. Or x plus 5. Let's write it like that. Okay? So let's write it x plus 5. Would you agree? Because that means the x1 plus x2 means we take the x's of the endpoints and we add those together. It's 2. It's not 5. I did that to see if you were paying attention. Not really. I saw that 5. And it's this one. Okay, so it's x plus what? 2. And then it's what? Y plus 4? I don't see any 4s in here. Y, oh, door, you said. Y plus what? 5. This is how I would start this off. Okay? This is exactly what I would do. Everybody with me? Chauncey, we were in the middle of something.
Yeah, Chauncey, sit down and shut up.
Here we go. So now, what do we do with this? Everybody understand this? That's our midpoint, so I put it in. This is the x part of the midpoint of those 2 endpoints, right? So x plus 2. And this is the y part, so I add the y1 and y2. That's my y1, that's my y2, or whatever. It doesn't matter what order. Okay? So now, what do I do with this, though? This is where people get confused. You're going to, but we want to do something first before we start thinking math right now, okay? What I'm going to do, what is this equal to? 5, exactly right. This is equal to 5. Everybody see it? Because these 2 ordered pairs are equal to each other. So this x part's got to equal to this x part, okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to write x plus 2 over 2 equals what? 5. Now we can do what you were going to say, but I want to set it up first, though. Now we're going to take the y part of it and set it equal to what? To 1, right there. So I'm going to go y plus 5 over 2 is equal to 1. It's not as hard as it looks, okay? I'm doing a lot of explaining, okay, with all this stuff right here, but you don't have to do that. The first thing that you need to do is this thing right there. That's what I would do right off the bat, okay? And now we just do a little bit of algebra and we're basically done, all right? So how do we get rid of this 2 on the bottom? Yeah, multiply everything by 2 here. Multiply that by 2. That 2 cancels. I've got x plus 2 equals 10. Subtract 2, so x is what? 8. Everybody good? Let's do this one. Same exact math. Multiply both sides by 2. You know they're going to cancel. All right, so I've got y plus 5 equals 2. Subtract 5 from both sides. What is that?
51.
It's 2 minus 5. Did I do this right,
So
right?
1 times 2 would be 1.
Huh? 1 times 2 is 1?
No.
1 times 2 is 2. All right, so y is what? Negative 3. Now, how do I write my answer? 8 what? Comma, negative 3, and put it in what? Parentheses. All right, and that's how you would write the other endpoint. So the other endpoint's going to be 8, negative 3. And that's how you do it. You will have one that looks just like that. The numbers may be a little different, but you're going to have one that looks just like that on the test. I think that's it for midpoint on the test. So 5 problems, a quarter of the test is just about midpoint. Okay? I mentioned this earlier. I'm talking about this in my other class. So what is that? What did I say earlier? Slope. Okay? So in my other class, I know it's everything I have in me to not go out there and say anything. Believe me, I'm trying to ignore it, but they're going outside, so they'll be out soon. All right, so the next thing is slope. So we need to know the formula for that. Okay, we just talked about the formula for midpoint. We should have that down. What is the formula for slope? And what, by the way, what letter do we use to represent slope? Yeah, we use letter M to represent slope. So slope is equal to its rise over run, right? Or the change in y over the change in x. So what does that mean, the change in y? What do I do to the y's this time? I don't add them like I did midpoint. What do? I subtract them. And again, it does not matter what order you subtract them. Listen, it doesn't matter what order you subtract them in as long as you subtract the x's and the y's in the same order, okay? So if I go y1 minus y2, I have to do what? x1 minus x2. A lot of books, most books say y2 minus y1. And I understand why they do that, but sometimes it just gets confusing. So I just end up saying y1 minus y2, all right? So that's the formula for slope. You got to know it, all right? You got to have it memorized to be able to do this. So they give you some points. Again, I'm just going to make it up. -2, -3, let's say. And, I don't know, -5, 4. Okay, here's 2 points. This looks very similar to the first problems that we did, doesn't it? All right, because I give you 2 points, but I'm asking you to find something completely different. What am I asking you to find on this problem? The slope and not the midpoint, okay? So you got to know the difference between the two. That's a common mistake students make. They look at this and they go, oh yeah, that looks really familiar, and then they do the midpoint, even though it says find the slope, or vice versa, okay? So this says find the what? The slope. So let's do it. This might be easier than the midpoint. That's how I started off, okay? So what do I do? I subtract the y's and put it on top. Does not matter what order you subtract them in. I just like going the first one minus the second one. Just, I don't know, just be consistent. All right, so which ones are the y's? The -3 and the 4. So I subtract those. So it's -3 minus 4. Don't forget to keep the negative with the 3. This is not a 3. I had a kid in my last class, 10th grade class. The number was 5, but I said -5 and 5 are completely different numbers. I'm like, Mr. Henrik, no, it's not. That's got a 5 in it. That's got a 5 in it. All right? But -3 and +3 are completely different numbers. Do you understand that? All right? They're not the same number, all right, just because they look the same. That negative makes a huge difference. So anyway, it's -3 minus 4. Now what do? Subtract the what? The x's, that's right. So the first one is -2. Since I went, watch, Since I went the first y minus the second y, I absolutely have to go the first x minus the second x. Okay? I could have done it the other way around. I could have gone 4 minus negative 3, but then I would have to go negative 5 minus negative 2. Minus negative 2, not minus 2. Okay? But I went the first one minus the second one. So let's go negative 2 minus what? Negative 5. Don't make that mistake and forget the negative. All right, let's see what this is. What's negative 3 minus 4? You can do that in your head. It's negative 7. What's this down here? What do those two negatives next to each other do? Right, they make a plus. So what's negative 2 plus 5? Positive 3. That's your answer right there. Yeah, slope's pretty easy, isn't it? Now, slope will get a little bit more confusing, but just finding the slope given 2 points, it shouldn't be too hard. That's number 6. You with me? I only give you one of those kind. There's more slope, though. Don't worry. So number 7. Before we do number 7, let me write this. Y equals, fill in the rest. It's an equation. Mx plus b. It's very famous. We use it a lot. You've seen it many times, haven't you? Y equals mx plus b. Okay. You obviously know we just said what letter represents the slope. What letter was that? The m. So this is the slope. Agreed? We call this slope-intercept form. All right? So what we want to do is this. This problem on the test says find the slope of this line. So they give you this. And all you have to do is find the slope of it. Okay? So this is what they give you right here. And they say, what is the slope of this line right here? But is this written in slope-intercept form the way we like it? No. How am I going to change this to make it look like this? Solve for what? Solve for y. Everybody watching? All right. So we got to solve for y. That's what we're trying to do. Do you see how y is by itself right here? I want to get y by itself right here. So what's my first step? What am I going to do in order to get the y by itself? First thing. What's that? Say it. You got it. Add a 2. That's right. I'm going to add a 2 to both sides. Add a 2 right here. All right. That cancels. So what am I left with? 4y equals what? 3x plus 2. Is it looking like this just yet? Not quite. One more step, and we'll do it. Divide by what? 4. Divide everything by 4. Actually, it doesn't even matter what our y-intercept is. I don't even care what that is. All I'm looking for is to find the what? Find the slope. That's all they ask you on number 7. Find the slope. That's all I want to find. All right? Now I can look at it and see it. Let's just write it out just for fun. So that's 3/4 x plus what? 1/2. What's the slope of this line? Just look at it now. It's 3/4. That's the slope. All right? So the slope is equal to 3/4. And that's what you circle right there. Okay? They don't ask you to do anything else. They could. They got to ask you to do a whole bunch of other stuff. But they just want to find the slope. All right? So that's how you do it. It's not too hard, is it? Just get y by itself. Now, they do that problem so you could do this next problem. All right? Or something like it. Number 8. All right. Yeah, we should be able to get half of these done today. So let's take a look at number 8. It says, determine whether lines AD and BC, let's write that down, AD and BC, we want to know if they're parallel, if they're perpendicular, or if they're neither. All right, well, you got to know some stuff. You got to know what A and D and B and C are, okay? So let's put that in there. So A is, I don't know, let's just make something up, -3, 4. B, we'll say is 3, 2. C, we'll say is 1, -4. And then D, I don't know, let's say it's 0, 3. Okay, this is what they give you, okay? I couldn't figure all that stuff out on my own. That's what they give you on the test. And what are they asking you to do? They're asking you, is AD parallel to BC? Are they perpendicular or are they neither? All right, it's got some slant and it's not perpendicular and it's not parallel. So what in the world do we do? Well, we got to know something about slopes. Okay, if they're parallel, almost spelled it wrong. If they're, spelled this 1,000 times, more than that. If they're parallel to each other, they have, we'll say, equal slopes.
Dude, can you stop talking? I'm trying to learn. Turn around.
Everybody with me? If they're parallel to each other, they have equal slopes. They have the same slope. If they're perpendicular, that's a long word. What's true about their slopes if they're perpendicular? I gave you 2 words to remember. What is it? Say it again. Okay, I usually say negative reciprocal, but you could say opposite reciprocal. It'd be perfectly fine. Okay, I'm going to write what I usually say. It's negative reciprocal. Just throw that down below it. What in the world does that mean? Well, if I gave you a fraction like 2/3, what's the negative reciprocal of 2/3? Well, negative means you change the sign. So what would the sign be? Be negative, and then reciprocal means you just flip the fraction. If I had a line with a slope of 2/3 and another line with a slope of -3/2, what would I know for a fact about those 2 lines? What are they to each other? One slope is 2/3, the other slope is -3/2. What's true about those 2 lines? They're parallel? They're perpendicular, right here. Okay, perpendicular. Negative reciprocals means they're perpendicular. What if I had a line that had a slope of 2/3 and another line that also had a slope of 2/3? What's true about these 2 lines? They're what? Anybody here today? They're the same slope, so they're what? They're parallel. Look.
I know. I made a mistake.
It says it right here. Look. If they're parallel, they have the same slopes or equal slopes. These are equal, correct? All right, so these 2 lines would be parallel. These 2 lines right here would be perpendicular because the slopes are negative reciprocals. I'm losing you guys. You only got like 3 minutes. You can't wait 3 minutes? So what are we going to do? What are we going to do with these points right here? We're going to find the what? The slopes. Let's find it. AD. Let's find the slope. I'll put slope and I'll put a little AD underneath of it. Okay? Let's find the slope of AD. I don't understand why you can't pay attention when this is going to be on the test. It just baffles me. Right there. All right, that's all right. Just spell it however you want. I only got like a minute left. All right, the slope between A and D. So here's A and here's D. So what do? Subtract the y's, 4 minus 3. Okay, and then subtract the x's. That's -3 minus 0. So what's the slope of AD? It's 1 over -3, or -1/3, correct? Now, let's find the slope of what else? BC. So let's find the slope of BC. So I'm going to find the slope between these 2. People are still not paying attention. Subtract the x or the y's from each other. So it's 2 minus -4. Subtract the x's from each other. That would be 3 minus 1. Minus a negative is plus, so that would be 6. This would be 2. What is that? What's 6? 6 over 2? Is 1/2? 6 divided by 2. It's 3. Now look. Now what I have to do is look at the 2 slopes. Look at the 2 slopes. Are these 2 lines parallel? Are they perpendicular? Or are they neither? Why are they perpendicular? Very good. Exactly right. 3 is the negative reciprocal of -1/3. So what's true about these? Whoops. These are perpendicular. All right, that was only number 8. We didn't quite finish half of them. We'll do that tomorrow.